Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Amy Blankson. Amy is the co founder and chief evangelist of the Digital Wellness Institute and the best selling author of a great book, The Future of Happiness. Amy's a graduate of Harvard and the Yale School of Management, and the only person to receive not one, but two Point of Light awards from two US presidents. Most of us don't even have one. That's pretty nice. She's also a member of the UN Global Happiness Council, a fellow of the World Innovation Organization, a featured professor in Oprah's e-course on happiness, and a regular contributor to Forbes. Her current work focuses on how we can cultivate, and it's so important, the well-being and happiness that we all need in today's digital age. And if you're reading the headlines or you're raising kids, this is more important than ever. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Joe. Happy to be here.
Okay, so what do you wish more people knew?
I wish they knew that digital wellness is absolutely integral to the vitality of an organization, both from an operational perspective, but also from a strategic and health perspective as well.
Okay, so I want to get into that digital wellness piece. It's a very powerful concept. There's a lot of work that you and others have done around it. But first, I want to just sort of frame this problem for us. It seems like we've gone from an always on culture, which may still exist, but has been compounded with an always online culture. And we're constantly tethered to our screens and to our devices. That pinging, that dinging, that ringing we were talking before, it can come up at the worst times and leave the worst impact. Speaking of that, tell us about the toll, not just to our work, but to ourselves.
I think the reason that you might feel like you are always online or that we are constantly connected is because we actually are. Since the pandemic started in 2020, the amount of time we spend on screens as human beings has gone up by 30%. And we all expected that number to go down, but in fact, it's stayed steady. It has not gone down. And what that means in terms of a toll is that 30% of our human experience has shifted, which is probably the biggest shift since the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the century. And when we're thinking about this, that has impacts on our sleep, on our happiness, on the way that we connect with one another, on our productivity levels, on the way that we conceptualize of how we exist in the world as human beings and in relation to our devices. And that toll is massive, particularly in the workplace. We're seeing that digital distraction has gone up by 40%. We find that 89% of employees are experiencing work debilitating distraction that is coming home with them, that employees are bringing that stress home, not just for themselves, but for their families as well. And those impacts are huge across well-being for ourselves as individuals and our happiness levels.
Yeah, so the phones and the devices that we carry with us also bring along all sorts of costs to our well-being, our sense of who we are, and frankly, how we do what we do best.
Absolutely. There's an opportunity cost when we spend more time doing something on email. We're doing less of something off of email, and those numbers are a zero-sum game in terms of our time. We have finite time, so what we do with it matters, and where we put our attention matters.
Mm. Okay, so when I think about my own well-being, I see that as sort of a composition of two factors, right? There's my beliefs and there's my behaviors. And I imagine it's kind of the same thing when it comes to digital well-being, not just, the way that we act around our devices, but also the way we think about our whole relationship to those devices. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I think that we typically have two different types of relationships. One is one of obsession, and the other one is one of guilt. And the obsession one is where we fall into patterns. We don't realize that we've started the doom scroll. We've spent longer online than we meant to. And the other one is, wow, I know I have to be online for work. I'm on devices all the time to manage life. It's part of living in the world today. And everyone's telling me that the more time I spend online is bad for me, and I feel horrible about it. And so you feel like you're stuck in a catch-22, as though there's nothing that we can do about this dilemma. And in fact, I think the message I want to share is one of empowerment, that it is not about guilt. It's not about trying to shame people into changing their behaviors. It's rather about saying, Actually, we have a lot of latitude to change the way that we interact. And we have the ability to make some very small micro decisions that can impact our behavior in some major ways. And that's what I want to encourage today is to think about, does your device make you happier right now? When you're using it, do you feel like you hit that point of no return where it makes you feel irritable and frustrated, or you might even want to throw it out the window? I've heard that a few times. Or is it something that's supportive and that you feel in control of? And ultimately, that's that point of digital flourishing, where you're in control of the tech, not the other way around.
So I want to dial down into that just a little bit. Are there certain practices that as individuals we can do to take more control and ultimately attain a greater sense of balance, of flourishing, as you describe it, uh, with that relationship that we have with our devices?
Absolutely. So I like to think about this in terms of a three-step process. So starting from a place of awareness, do you actually have a good sense of awareness about your digital wellness? And if you don't, it's okay. Most people don't. We know about our mental health and physical health, but we probably have not really thought about our digital wellness in the same breath. But to really think about, is this a healthy relationship I have? And also to get a gut check on that. So if you think in your mind how much time you might be spending online, if you were to check your phone, what number do you think it would say in terms of how much time you spent over the last week?
Oh gosh, I'm really afraid to even know that number.
I
So,
won't make you say it on air,
yeah, I'm
but
gonna keep that private. We'll talk offline.
right. So then the next step is to actually go and get a data benchmark. So go into your phone. On iPhone, it's under settings, and you go to screen time. And on Android, it's settings and digital well-being. And from there, you can actually see real numbers that show you just from your phone use, not that's not include your gaming devices, your work computer, your television, like all of those other things, but just your phone. Get a get check on where are you at. And usually there's a few aha moments. And this is where that guilt and shame starts to creep in. We feel bad, don't feel bad. This is all about empowerment, right? So if you're not where you want to be, where do you want to be? How do you get there? And that's where we set those intentions. That's step two. So this is who I want to be, how I want to show up in the world, how I want people to perceive me, how I want to interact with people. And then the third step is setting some boundaries for yourself, which is, if I need help getting there, are there certain times of day that I need to set up guardrails for myself? And the one I've been personally trying is, for the first 5 minutes of the day, I'm not going to touch my phone. It's a starting place, right? Maybe for the last 5 minutes of the day, right? So just begin in little places. You don't have to swear off social media. You don't have to say, I'm going to cut my screen time by 90%, talking 5 minutes here. And that's the beginning of awareness and behavior change.
Yeah, it's like a digital detox on terms that you can control, yeah, that are actually
Exactly.
satisfying to you.
They're palatable.
Yes, exactly. So that's really interesting. So shift gears for a second here, and let's kick over to the organizational side, because that's where we're spending a lot of our time and hence a lot of our touch points with all the tech. So is it just a matter of us, like you're saying, being more intentional and giving more attention to how we're using our devices when we're at work, or is there a role here for organizations to, I guess, message it and manage it a little better on behalf of their employees?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head, Joe, because I'm passionate that leaders have a duty of care for their employees. When I hear employees say, wow, I'd love to have digital boundaries, but my manager messages me at all hours of the day, it is very hard to swim upstream here. So there is a leadership responsibility, not only for modeling, but also enabling people to have the time and space they need to get the work done that they want to do. Employees actually want to do their work, but what's holding them back is that we're getting 237 notifications a day. I've talked to some people who are getting 330 Slack messages every single day. And you wonder, when are they actually going to have time to do the work? And they
Right.
feel that. They feel the pressure and frustration. And that's what's driving the burnout and the retention issues that we're seeing in many workplaces today. So as a leader, it's about speaking the speak, really talking about digital wellness, backing it up with supportive policies that help. Third would be offering some training and some resources to your employees to help them understand and reframe so that they can navigate this 30% shift in the world that we're living in today.
Do you think they're measuring for this correctly? I know a lot of companies will gather data on that and ask their employees, about that sense of balance that they're experiencing. Do you feel like they're getting that right, or could there be things that they're, potentially doing better in that regard?
I've talked to hundreds of organizations at this point, and I can name on one hand the number of organizations who I think are doing this right. Every single organization I talk to talks about survey fatigue, and I feel you on that. And so there is usually an annual engagement survey where you measure one question that might be related to well-being. And then to back that up, you might have a quarterly pulse survey that might dig a little deeper into mental health, of which maybe one question will relate to digital wellness.
Okay.
And in this day and age where our lives have shifted by 30% in this domain, one question quarterly is just not going to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem I'm hearing from organizations is that the red tape to get even a single question on these surveys changed takes about 2 years. Well, if you think about it, in the span of the last 3 years, all of this has happened. So if we wait 2 more years to change things, we have a massive productivity leak that's costing us time, money, energy, and some of our best people. So survey fatigue is not a good enough reason to not be measuring this. I often say if you treasure it, you've got to measure it. And the time for doing that is right now. And I think there's some creative low-key ways that we can do that. It doesn't have to be a formal, huge survey, but we can do some little informational gathering, or even use feedback from teams to get some basic data points to begin making changes.
Yeah, so increasing that signal so that they can actually make better sense of the noise that's going on in their organization.
Absolutely. Well said.
So I know you've started this amazing partnership through Digital Wellness Institute with Fast Company on helping companies identify if they're digitally balanced and offering a certification in that process. That's intriguing to me. So what is a digitally balanced workplace? And can you get into some of the standards and benchmarks that would indicate that?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked, because this is something I'm passionate about. For us, digital balance means using technology to our advantage while avoiding the associated harms that come with it. So it goes beyond just unplugging, but really involves developing skills and creating an environment that supports effective screen time and also efficient offline recharge. And so to do that, we developed a data standard that helps organizations to measure in less than 5 minutes how their employees are feeling about whether or not their workplace is digitally balanced. And that just simply means creating those spaces where employees can feel like they can get their work done. It's about training and speaking the language and really providing those effective guardrails for organizations. And the reason we developed this was not only to provide a data standard, but really to provide an incentive for organizations to begin moving in this direction. And perhaps even more importantly, is to hold up some thought leaders in this space who are already doing the work and modeling what this looks like in the wild. Because a lot of organizations have heard about the right to disconnect that started in Europe. And they say, that sounds like a great idea, but in practice, how do we actually do this? And it's a great question, because I think in global teams with different countries represented in different hours and time zones, it's a very difficult road to walk. But I think the idea of having a digitally balanced organization celebrates how organizations are creatively bringing mindfulness and digital mindfulness into the workplace, holds up exact examples, and provides a carrot to get organizations to be able to step forward and say, yes, I actually care about this. And I want to show my employees that this is something that we not only value, but we're putting time and attention and resources into. And so it's the beginning of a conversation. It's the beginning of a whole new paradigm for how companies can operate in this new world.
Yeah, so it's naming it, it's recognizing it, it's supporting it, it's recognizing and ultimately rewarding these kinds of behaviors within organizations. Wow.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna go check that number on my phone, and hopefully won't be too embarrassed when I go look at it. The digital age can either refine us or it can confine us, and that's a choice we ultimately make. You made that very clear. Amy Blankson, you're on a mission to help us get closer to making better choices around our devices. Go check out Digital Wellness Institute and Fast Company for ways that you can become a digitally balanced workplace. Amy, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Jeff.